Well, good afternoon, everyone. AFR is on your radio. Jay Smith here alongside with Jason Price. Excited to bring you another edition of our show after further review. Looking so much forward to talking about Ole Miss sports with you today, Jason. We have a special guest. Miss Mary Ann Wakefield is going to be on with us shortly, but let's dive right into it, Jason, after further review.
So, Jay, what if I told you that an 84-year-old woman accomplished something never done before in the pavilion?
I would be surprised, but as we saw this past Saturday, it happened, and now we have with us on the phones Miss Mary Ann Wakefield. How you doing today, Miss Mary Ann? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I couldn't hear you before. Yes, I could hear you. Couldn't hear the announcer.
Oh, I apologize. Well, we were working through a few technical issues, but we really appreciate you taking the time to call on and talk with us. I guess I got to ask first off the bat, because I'm an avid golfer, but I really need help with my putting. So do you have any tips for me? Because just how calm, cool, and collected you were when you walked up to hit that putt at the pavilion on Saturday, it was just unbelievable.
Well, I prayed to be calm, but actually I'm a terrible golfer. My husband taught me to golf when I was in my 50s, but I could hit the ball pretty good. But once I got close to the green, I just blew everything. I mean, really, my putting was terrible. That was just a miracle last Saturday.
Oh, absolutely. And, we got to ask, too, were you nervous at all? What were you thinking as you lined up that putt?
Before I approached the ball, I asked him, could I place the ball? And he said no. And I walked up to it. I just remember saying to myself, "Dear God, just let me be calm and relax," And I was. I got up there and I was very relaxed. Didn't feel any pressure, and the ball was lined up the way I liked it. But it was just a matter of let me hit it straight and easy. I kept saying, "Hit it easy," and follow through. That's what I did, and I was more amazed than anybody that went in.
Yes, ma'am. So I have to ask, it looked like you were a professional walking up to the ball. Did you account for the curve in the court, or did you just go up there and say, I'm just going to give it my best shot? And did you have a high level of confidence before you took that shot?
I'm sorry. I'm losing you. You sound like you're in the...
He was just asking, what kind of, did you go up there and did you read the break in the slope of the court, or did you just get up there and hit it straight?
I just tried to hit it straight. If it did have breaks, I'd be in trouble. I wouldn't be able to make a 2-foot putt.
Well, also, at what point do you think, when it was rolling down the court, when did you think it might go in?
Well, I tell you the truth, I couldn't see it once it went past half court, and I didn't know it went in until everybody started screaming, and the announcer said something. But when I first got up to the ball, and on the video you might see me looking over my shoulder and ask him a question. I couldn't even see the hole, and because I had a black background and a black hole, and I thought, "Where's the hole?" And he tried to. So finally, when I got up there, I could see this little black place, and I just said, "Pray, God, it's up to you," and I hit it.
And I tell you what, the roar after you made that putt, not only has it been everywhere, all over social media, Sports Center's picked it up. We know that you had an interview this morning with media up in Memphis. Just talk about what the last few days have been like for you. I'm sure you've been whisked around. You were on Rev Talk last night at Boo-Ray. Talk about that experience.
Oh, it's just been unbelievable. Really, because I was so glad my daughter came down from St. Louis, because she has a very organized mind. So when I got a phone call from these different places, I just handed it over to her, let her handle it. So she calls herself my manager. But I could not have organized it, because I got the Inside Edition, Fox News, Access Hollywood, or Hollywood Excess, and
all sorts of places.
I just can't even name them all, but it's just unbelievable.
And Miss Marianne, I'm sure that you have seen that you got the #1 play in the Sports Center top 10. Have your grandkids or children been kind of mooching off of that fame a little bit, or have they just been gloating with you and all of that?
I'm sorry. I really sorry, but I lost you again on the.
He was asking if now that you've gotten the #1 play on Sports Center by making that putt, what have your grandkids been saying? Have your kids talked about?
Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, you're the #1 play on Sports Center last week. How about that?
Oh my gosh, that's unbelievable.
Well,
I knew my daughter told me that there's been over 3 million Twitters, and I don't even twit.
Well, one last question we'll ask before we let you go. And again, we really appreciate you taking time to spend a few minutes with us. What's the first place? Where do you think you're going to go first with your brand new 2020 Nissan Altima?
I've got to find a garage to put it in because I live in an apartment complex, and there's just too many cars here. I don't want this to sound ugly, but there's too many student drivers.
Yes.
Especially on Saturday night.
Completely understand that. Completely understand. Well, Miss Marianne, we really appreciate you taking the time to call in and talk to us. Thank you so much.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Have a good day. Thank you. And that was Miss Mary Ann Wakefield. Really excited to have her on the show. Reached out to someone that knew her on Twitter last night, and they were kind enough to put us in touch with her. Jason, it's hard to really conceptualize just how rare that accomplishment is, because so many people get up and a lot of basketball teams will do this kind of media publicity stunt. Hey, make this court long putt, you win a few $1,000s, or you win a new car, and every so often, every few years, it happens.
And I think that this is the hero that every Ole Miss student and fan needed. It wasn't the player who goes out to the golf course every day, practices their putting, or even a student who hits the court on a regular basis or hits the course on a regular basis. It was the 84-year-old Miss Mary Ann Wakefield, and you saw the eruption of the crowd. Everybody went absolutely crazy, and there was just no experience like it. The whole pavilion just absolutely lit up.
Yeah, it was the most excited I think I'd seen the pavilion in a long time, and obviously the outcome of the game was not great for Ole Miss. They lost to Alabama. Can't remember exactly what the score was, but it was, I think, their third straight loss, either in SEC play or overall, and they've dropped now to, I think, 13-14 on the season, 4-10 in SEC play. So the Rebels continue to struggle, men's and women's. I think women's finishes off their SEC play against Mississippi State this week. And one would be very surprised if they were able to take down the Bulldogs.
Yeah, and Kermit Davis said himself that was the best play of the second half.
Oh, man.
That was the best thing that happened for Ole Miss in the second half.
Oh, man.
Wasn't anything that had to do with a basketball whatsoever. It was Miss Mary Ann making that putt, and I think that he is 100% right when it comes to that. And Ole Miss has just been this team to go on streaks. They won 3 straight conference games, and then now they've lost their 3rd straight. They're just a really inconsistent team at this point, and they have Brian Tyree, who is the cornerstone of that team, and he is trying all that he can to help the team out. But when you have younger assistant players and players who haven't been pushed to the front lines just yet, I'm still waiting for Devontae Schuler to really open up because he's shown that he is a great defensive player. He just can't make the big shots when it comes down to crunch time, and also as good of a player as Brian Tyree is when it comes to his crunch time free throw ability, that has got to improve because, those are the shots that we need. And Ole Miss has always been infamous for being bad at the line.
Yeah.
And we were really good from the free throw line last year, and that showed whenever we went to the NCAA tournament. Even though that we got blown out by Oklahoma, that was the first Ole Miss team to make it to the tournament in years, and it really relied on the consistency of the team and the confidence from the line.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's definitely a transition year for them, and hopefully they're able to turn it around with a little bit more experience next year, and obviously Kermit Davis will be around, one would imagine. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into some more Ole Miss talk. We're going to talk a little bit of football, going to bring up some baseball news. Of course, we've got to talk about Wilder versus Fury. That is all coming up next. Stick around with us. Welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for tuning in and spending your Tuesday afternoon with us. Again, Jay Smith and Jason Price here bringing you After Further Review. We were able to talk to Miss Mary Ann Wakefield a little bit earlier today. Obviously, she is the 84-year-old lady who made the 94-foot putt in the pavilion Saturday night during the Rebels basketball game against the Alabama Crimson Tide. But now we're going to transition, talk a little bit about some other Ole Miss sports. Jason, you want to start with baseball, or are we going to go dive into football first?
I think the most relevant thing, even though baseball did get the sweep over Xavier over the weekend, I would love to talk about this Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, the number 2, the rematch. I think that was an excellent fight, and it's kind of, there was a lot of people that said that Deontay Wilder, with his knockout ability, would be able to win the fight again in a maybe not as controversial way, but I actually expected Tyson Fury to be the better boxer, which he is overall, and I was thinking that he was gonna just finish the fight not as early as he actually did, though.
I think it's we talked about this a little bit before going live. With Fury, he has come so far. You got to remember, I think it was you that mentioned the picture of him in 2017, where obviously he was out of shape. And it's just really incredible when you look at the fact that he's been in retirement for the last 3 years. He's had some struggles, obviously, with substance abuse and other things. And to come back from that and to really put a beat down on Wilder, who up until that point, was undefeated in his professional career. I think he was like 42-0-1, I believe, all time. I think it definitely was one of the most iconic boxing performances of all time.
And I think just the first fight added a lot of publicity and added a lot of eyes to the fight itself. And whenever it came down to just pure excitement, it had all of that. And if you're a boxing fan, if you're just a fan of sports in general, that is the kind of fight that you want. You don't want it to end too quickly, because if you paid for the fight, then you would be livid. But you also don't want it to see it end in a draw, just like it did last time with Deontay Wilder keeping the belt. So I think that this is exactly what all of the boxing fans were looking for, and I'm glad that it played out in such an exciting way.
Well, we actually have a caller on with us now. Jack Gerard has called in. Jack, can you hear us?
Jason.
Hey, what's going on, Jack? How you doing, my man?
I'm good, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. You have a question for us today?
Oh, yeah. I was just going to ask what your take was on the Tyson Wilder fight.
We were actually just talking about that, funny enough.
Yeah.
We called in. It's, I think, and we mentioned this briefly, but we can kind of go back over it. It's definitely, I think, one of the more iconic boxing performances of all time from Fury, just because of the fact that he's been in retirement for the last 3 years. He's had a lot of personal struggles and issues that he's come back from. It's his second heavyweight championship of the world. And, I mean, let's be honest. He toyed with Wilder and then just beat him down. And it says something that Wilder's corner had to be the one to throw in the towel.
Right. And Jack, to your question, I think that this fight perfectly set up a trilogy when it comes to these two boxers, because Tyson Fury said before the fight that if he loses this one, he's retiring. He's done. And he has, I think it's 3 fights left on his ESPN contract. And so with him winning this fight, and Deontay Wilder is nowhere near retiring. He's definitely going to want to come back, and he's had a couple excuses to why he maybe lost the fight, like his 40-pound suit that he was wearing walking into the ring, and that made his legs weak, things like that. So I think that with the way this fight ended and the publicity that these two fighters got just from the first and second fight, I think we are bound to see a Wilder versus Fury number 3 going into the summer, if not before the summer.
Oh, for sure.
So, Jack, can I get your perspective on who you thought was going to win the fight before they stepped into the ring, and your reaction from the fight just overall?
I thought Wilder was going to win, but I was listening when he got hit in the ear and he started stumbling, I knew he was going to be done sooner or later. I didn't think his corner should have thrown in the towel that early, though. Because that round he actually looked decent, and it didn't look like he was wobbling around enough, but I don't know. I guess they were just trying to play it safe, but I didn't like how they threw in the towel that early.
I mean, I think you have to kind of look at the fact that in those last couple of rounds, he was taking a lot of hits and wasn't, quite able to defend himself as well as he had been in the first few rounds. I mean, a lot of that is fatigue, right? These are big guys slugging it out at each other. But you could kind of tell that Wilder's step wasn't quite as springy after that hit to the ear. And I think, obviously boxing is arguably one of the more physically demanding sports, just in terms of what your body has to go through. And look, 15, 20 years ago, you're probably right. I think they probably let him slug it out, and Fury probably knocks him out a couple rounds later. But with the development and a lot of medical awareness, obviously with CTE and other things, concussions, I personally think that his corner probably did him a favor, because I don't think there's anyone out there who really thought Wilder was going to beat Fury after watching those first 7 rounds.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
All right, well, hey, Jack, I really appreciate you taking the time to call in, man. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Jack.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, well, look at us now. We've got 2 call-ins and 1 show. I think he brings up an interesting point with, when should a corner throw in the towel? Whose decision should that be? Should they leave it up to the fighter? I think we can kind of talk a little bit more about this, but I personally am of the opinion that, if you're kind of stumbling around, if there is a noticeable and marked difference in your ability to defend, punches, because Wilder, was not as capable in those later rounds, and Fury was just, he was starting to land, just punch after punch after punch. I think I saw a stat after the fight of, punches thrown versus punches landed, and Fury just dominated in both categories. What do you think? Do you feel like nowadays it's acceptable for his corner to throw in the towel? I mean, obviously there's people on different sides of the fence.
I mean, I think that the entire boxing world was really pampered by Mike Tyson, because Mike Tyson was one of those fighters that you didn't have to question whether or not his opponent was going to be able to continue, or if the fight was going to go all 12 rounds. You knew that if Mike Tyson hit somebody in the side of the head, that's the fight. So that's how it, and then people nowadays, they're used to seeing, if you weren't alive during Mike Tyson's prime, used to seeing Mike Tyson highlights, you're used to seeing just knockout punches, even Deontay Wilder highlights with how he would finish his opponents, and you expect that if you're not on the ground, then the fighter's going to get up and continue the fight. But logically, and I mean, that's just how that's how humans are. If two people step in the ring and we immediately think, okay, they're going to fight until the other one has their eyes closed, laid down flat on the mat. And that's honestly just not really how it goes. They fight until the other fighter cannot go any longer.
Well, I was able to find that stat column, and it says that Fury, so talking about punches thrown. So Fury threw 267 punches, Wilder threw 141. That is nearly double what Wilder was able to throw. Now, punches landed, Fury had 82. Wilder only with 34. Again, there's a huge difference there, right? This wasn't a one punch made the difference kind of fight. This wasn't he got one good one to the ear and that completely changed the inside. No, I mean, this was a consistent beating, throughout the course of the 7 rounds. I think one of the more telling statistics is that Fury landed at a 30% clip, and Wilder had only 24. With Fury, he landed 58 power punches in less than 7 rounds, and in the first meeting, he only had 38.
Yeah, and I think it really spoke to just before the fight. They were showing videos of Deontay Wilder before the fight, just absolutely stone cold, sitting down. He was pacing around the room, just waiting for the fight. He was just eager, itching to get out there. And Tyson Fury is in his room, in his dressing room, dancing around, smiling, having a good time,
singing songs. Singing karaoke with the audience after the fight.
Exactly. I mean, like, it just seemed like Tyson Fury's energy level was higher than anyone could have expected. And you just see, and the way that Tyson Fury fights, he has. If you're not really that familiar with boxing, Tyson Fury lives on what is called feints, and so he will feint with the left just to see how you'll react, and it's just kind of like a test punch, not really expecting to land it, just seeing where you're going to guard and what you're going to leave open. And Tyson Fury lives on his footwork and his feints, and Deontay Wilder lives on that right hammer. He just waits for it. He'll do a couple jabs with the left just to try to open up that right, but it seems like Tyson Fury is way more dynamic when it comes to fighting, and Deontay Wilder is just a one-trick pony. And so I think that it just showed in Tyson Fury's energy level with the way that he was dancing around, even not if we're just excluding before the fight, even in the ring. The way, I mean, he had Muhammad Ali feet out there. He
did. And again,
around.
I think we kind of talked a little bit about this before we went live, but he is good for boxing. He's a dynamic personality. He will draw eyes from even, not only casual boxing fans like myself, but also people that may or may not have ever tuned into a fight before. I mean, there's been some big fights recently. I mean, McGregor's been in a few big ones, Pacquiao several years ago. But I really think, and Fury probably won't have, a ton of more years left. I mean, he's on the kind of the tail end of his career. We might see a Wilder versus Fury number 3, but and just to close this discussion, to move on, I mean, I personally don't think there's as much intrigue, because unless Wilder really steps up his game or changes his approach, I don't see him beating Fury. I don't even see it being close.
Yeah, and Deontay Wilder is a knockout fighter. And just moving right along, who delivered a knockout punch this weekend was the Ole Miss baseball team. When it came to playing against Xavier in the weekend series, you saw on Friday night Ole Miss had a combined no-hitter, won 13-0, and then on Saturday the bat stayed hot and Ole Miss still did not let up a run, won 9-0, and then on Sunday they actually, which is kind of funny, they actually hit a walk-off home run in the bottom of the 8th to run rule Xavier to win 13-3. So Jay, could I just get your perspective and what you think that this means for the Ole Miss baseball team coming off of a sort of iffy win against Alcorn State in the middle of the week?
I think, look, baseball is an ebb and flow sport. You got your ups, you got your downs. Even as a casual baseball fan, emphasis on casual, I know that. Over the course of a season, you're going to have peaks and you're going to have valleys. But with Ole Miss this season, we haven't seen a lot, and some would definitely say we haven't seen enough yet to have a really accurate prognosis on what this team is going to look like. Here are the facts, though. They're 6-1. They're on a 6-game streak right now. The only loss was the season opener to Louisville that Friday. I think they lost that 7-2 in favor of the Cardinals. You're right. The Alcorn State game was close, went 10 innings, but looked impressive against Xavier. Now, I'm more interested to see how they fare, starting on that 28th when they go to their first away game, the Keith LeClaire Classic up in Greenville, North Carolina, against High Point, East Carolina, Indiana. There's games on the schedule. There's series on the schedule that you're going to want to circle, but it's really difficult to gauge where they're at 7 games into the season because we both know, right? They might have a great February, might start off hot, and then March they might slump for a week or two. I mean, that's just kind of how baseball works sometimes. I do think, though, I saw that Anthony Servideo was named National Player of the Week by Collegiate Baseball this past week, and really interesting is that it took Servideo just 7 games in 2020 to match his career home run total. He only had 4, but still,
I mean,
starting off hot.
This guy, he has a 500 batting average, and on Saturday he hit 2 home runs, both over center field, which, I mean, people know that center field is the farthest part of a baseball field. Obviously, just smacked him over 396 feet, I believe, is the distance. And it's a completely different player than we've seen last year. Because Servideo, he was still one of the top players for Ole Miss last year.
Right.
But when you look at him now, we look to Anthony Servideo for his power hitting, which we haven't done before. And honestly, I'm going to give my opinion on this. I think it's the blonde hair. I think Anthony Servideo went Super Saiyan, and I think he just has some unmatchable strength at the moment. And with him, we have Tyler Keenan and Cale Baker. It really makes Ole Miss a super exciting team to watch and a dangerous team heading into SEC play, which will not start until March 13th against LSU. But if the Ole Miss Rebels keep playing this way...
Is that a home series for Ole Miss?
This is going to be a home series against LSU. Actually, we do play tonight at home. We'll be playing Southern Miss at home. So an in-state rival. Rival is a very very casual word.
That's a loose term with Southern Miss. But again, I was really intrigued by the season opening series against Louisville. They were able to bounce back from that initial loss. I can't really... I'm not surprised with their performance against Xavier and Alcorn State. I think we all kind of expected that to be convincing wins. We'll see how they do tonight against Southern Miss. But again, with the ebb and flow of baseball, it just kind of, remains to be seen. One other accolade that was announced with Ole Miss baseball is that Doug Nikhazy won SEC Pitcher of the Week. So, again, early season accolades are nice, but not always a good indication of how your team is going to be throughout the rest of the season, and if they're an Omaha type of team.
Right, and I think Doug Nikhazy's performance on Friday really rested some nerves for the Ole Miss fans because playing against Louisville, obviously a more competitive team, a tougher team, but did not do so hot against Louisville that Friday night. The first time that
but he's only a sophomore.
That we were seeing him, right?
Only a sophomore, and he had no hits for 6 innings, and he allowed, I think it was 2 base runners with walks, and struck out 9. So an impressive performance for the sophomore. For
sure, and I think that Ole Miss fans everywhere were looking to Doug Nikhazy because this year the Ole Miss bullpen is not that deep, considering that we lost Parker Caracci last year, some other relievers. It's a good thing to see Doug Nikhazy really finding his spot and getting comfortable at the mound because I think that out of everything was the thing that people were most worried about and people were most excited about. Anthony Servideo really showing that when he steps up to the plate, you might want to move the outfielders back a little bit.
Okay, well, let's transition now and discuss a little bit of basketball news for the Rebels. Ole Miss back in action, men's back in action again tonight against number 15 Auburn. Interesting little nugget here because this is Ole Miss's first game since Saturday against where they lost to Alabama. Ole Miss has won 12 of the last 15 against Auburn, and I know that you can't always look to series history as an indicator of whether or not, because obviously you would certainly be able to make the case that the talent disparity is pretty high.
Right.
This time around, I don't think Ole Miss is going to upset Auburn. It's a home game,
Right.
so there is that. They have going for them.
Well,
and
it's
then,
a home game for Auburn because Ole Miss played Auburn at home earlier this season.
You're right. I had that incorrectly in my
And
notes then.
just speaking on that game in the last matchup, that was a game that Ole Miss should have won. At home, Ole Miss had a 19-point lead on Auburn in the second half. And that's kind of been the epitome of the Ole Miss basketball team, has been giving fans hope and then just slowly taking it away.
That sounds more like Ole Miss football to me.
I mean, you can just wrap it up in a tight little present for a lot of Ole Miss sports at this point. But except for the baseball team, because there wasn't too much hope after that loss on Friday and then beating Louisville 2 out of 3.
Well, silver lining, for Ole Miss basketball on Saturday was that Breon Tyree was 12 for 12 free throws against Alabama. That's the best for Ole Miss since 2013.
Right.
7 years. It has been 7 years since someone went at least 12 for 12 for free throws.
And like I was saying, Jay, I mean that has been the problem for Ole Miss in recent history, has been making free throws and even more so making clutch free throws. And I'm glad to see that Breon Tyree went 12 for 12. But my only problem is that he went 12 for 12 in a game that Ole Miss got blown out by 30 points.
Yeah.
And Ole Miss this season has either been, we're going to win a basketball game and it's going to be by a pretty nice margin, or we're going to either get blown out or it's just not really going to be close. Pretty one-sided.
Tyree is still averaging 20.6 points per game, which is the best in the SEC individually. I think he's averaging, I want to say, around 24 points a game in SEC play, which is still also best in SEC. But again, we talked about this last week, I think, a little bit. Is Tyree deserving of the Player of the Year?
Right.
And I still don't think he is, just because not only is he on a team that's in the bottom tier of the conference right now, but also I don't think it's a stretch to say that he's the only dynamic playmaker that we have.
I mean, that is true. I'd say he's the most prolific playmaker that we have. He might not be the only dynamic one that we have. But I think Breon Tyree is he's the cornerstone of this team.
He's consistent.
And
he's consistent. I think consistent would be the right word then.
Yeah. And he definitely, whenever Breon Tyree is doing well, it kind of urges other players to do well and kind of step up and play their part. But it's really not the same thing as last year whenever I just don't think that Breon Tyree is still comfortable just yet being the number one player for Ole Miss, because last year when Terrence Davis was here, Terrence Davis was the number one player and Breon Tyree got to play his role and was more comfortable in taking shots that he wanted and not shots that he had to take, because he's the only one who is trusted to make those shots. And I think that he does try as hard as he can, and the effort for the Ole Miss basketball team is there. And I think they just need another speech from Coach Kermit Davis. Whenever he told them before the Georgia game, he said, we just need to go out there and we need to start having fun again. And that was a big thing for Ole Miss. It just looked like they weren't having fun on the court. And really, when you have fun, you play better because you're more excited, you're more invested in the game. And I think they just need to get back to having fun like they were whenever they were on that 3-game win streak.
I guess to close the discussion here about basketball, what do you think? Do you think Kermit Davis is going to be on the hot seat after this season?
I don't think Kermit Davis will be. I think that.
Do you think he should be?
I don't think he could be or should be. I think that Kermit Davis, in his first season, brings Ole Miss to the NCAA tournament. Right. And even though those players were not his players, I think that Coach Kermit Davis is a really good recruiter, and we are a young team. We still have a lot of young players. My favorite young player on the team is Luis Rodriguez. He is, I believe he's 6'6", if I'm not mistaken. He's a really versatile guard, and I think that if you just give these guys a little time to mature and find their groove, as well as Coach Kermit Davis bringing in more high-profile players, I think that can really just feed into his success. And I don't think that it should be time to kind of hang up the phone on Coach Kermit Davis just yet.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from. Here's what I'm going to look at. Here's what I'm going to point to. Yes, they're a young team. Yes, there's a lot of room for growth. And yes, Kermit Davis, hasn't been here. This is his
Second year.
They're 10-5 at home. It's not bad, but you play a lot of cupcakes at home.
Right.
Their away record is 1-8. That's bad. 1-8 on the road, you're really going to have a hard time getting to 500, which is where they're at right now. They're 13-14. They're 4-10 in the conference. I mean, I guess I'm not saying that the SEC basketball isn't great, but I would say it's not ACC basketball. And to be 4-10 is worrisome to at least some degree. I mean, I'm looking here at the schedule. The only win on the road was, I believe, that Georgia game.
Yeah, it was the Georgia game,
which was on January 25th. That's what's concerning to me is 10-5 at home. You can swallow that. But when you look at, and some of them were close, right? Some of them were super close, like the Auburn game in double overtime. The LSU game, 80-76. The Arkansas game, 76-72. Like they're super close. Like the margin of victory is for those other teams is razor thin, but it's just not doing enough down the stretch at home, and then also on the road. There's no consistency. Now maybe that will come with another year and more time in the system. The players get older, they get more experienced. It's really hard to say. But I just, like I said, in closing the discussion here about basketball, I just think that he has got to figure out how, they can steal a few of those road games. Because here's the thing. If they go, the rest of the schedule, you got Auburn tonight, all right? Let's say we lose Auburn. You're 1-9.
Let's say,
yeah. Barring a miracle. You've got Vandy and Missouri at home, and you got Mississippi State on the road. You picking them to win state? Do you think they get it done?
I'll pick Ole Miss to beat Mississippi State in that game. I think it's going to be a lot closer than the last one. Okay. I just don't think because Reginald Perry is pretty much the main man for Mississippi State, mm-hmm. who they rely on the most heavily. But I think that Ole Miss's real problem here, and that Coach Kermit Davis should really emphasize, is getting athletic big men. Because that's been a problem for Ole Miss. Yeah. We have been getting out-rebounded against teams that have an athletic center, things like that. Kadeem C., I give him all the props. He's definitely doing better than Olenichek was doing last season, mm-hmm. Who is now playing at Florida State and is actually contributing better than he did here at Ole Miss. But I think that Coach Kermit Davis should really look at trying to find the most athletic big men centers that want to come play at a school like Ole Miss and want to help a program like ours rise up to the next level.
And here's the thing too with Mississippi State, right? They're 17-10 overall, 8-6 in the conference. But again, here's the magic stat line: they're 12-2 at home. Oof. I don't give Ole Miss the nod because Mississippi State 12-2 at home, Ole Miss 1-9 after tonight, 1-9 on the road. So, yeah, you're right. Could they beat them? Sure, they beat Georgia. It's certainly possible. But, if you play that game 10 times, odds are Mississippi State is likely to have the edge. So I think to just kind of go back to the point, like, if they drop the Auburn game and they drop the State game, you won one road game.
Right.
You can't do that and expect to make the tournament, let alone be in the conversation for being on the bubble, right? Like, you're going to have to win, where's that marquee road game? And you're right, like, if they were able to win tonight, or if they're able to beat Kentucky back on the 15th, they lost that game by 5, 67-62, maybe we're having a different conversation. There's just other games that like stick out to me, like Wichita State back on January 4th. They got slapped 74-54.
Yeah.
It wasn't competitive. It wasn't competitive.
I mean, I think games like Ole Miss versus Mississippi State, it's always so hard to give a prediction.
Sure.
Just because
Sure.
it's pretty much the same thing as the Egg Bowl.
Sure.
Just on a different level. Because you never know who's going to win those rivalry games.
Mhm.
Mississippi State was favored to beat Ole Miss here at home. And then Ole Miss, Brian Tyree scored 40 points. Now will he break out for something like that against Mississippi State on the road? That is something that I can't be too confident with, but I am looking for some shooters like Blake Henson or Devontae Shuler to maybe find their groove and kind of take some slack away from Brian Tyree on the road, because those are the games that Ole Miss seems to lack confidence in, and especially when it comes to that Kentucky game, there was a chance for Ole Miss to win that game. And Brian Tyree missed 2 critical free throws that would have really put Ole Miss like within contention of winning that game. And there's just times like that like I've preached this over and over again, Jay, a psychiatrist. We need a psychiatrist to go in there and tell these guys, like, hey, wait a second, you can win this game. I promise you can win this game.
Yeah. That closer mentality.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's finish, whether that's in football or basketball or any other sport that we're discussing. I think you're right. Ole Miss needs to create that mindset that, hey, even though we're down, we're not out. We can still get this done. Or if we're trying to hang on to a lead, it's doable. I agree with your points there. We got 10 minutes left in the show, and there's some college football news that we wanted to get to. So now we're going to transition into some Ole Miss football news. Look, spring ball starts March 17th. So what do you think we should expect from the Rebels? What are we going to expect to see from Lane Kiffin's first year at the helm? Because he's been running. He's run the spread in the past. He's also had success with the pro style offense. But what do you think we're going to see from him? And y'all have the spring game. What's the name for the Ole Miss spring game?
That is called the Grove Bowl.
The Grove Bowl. And that is coming up on, let's see if we can get a date on the Grove Bowl. It is, what date is the Grove Bowl? Do you have a date, Jason?
I am.
Or has it been set yet? I'm not even sure if the Grove Bowl has been announced. Let's see. The Grove Bowl, April 18th. Saturday, April 18th is what I'm seeing, and that's a little ways. That's about a month into spring ball, but still, will give us a pretty good idea of what to expect in the fall. You got to imagine, though, the biggest question people have: who's quarterbacking?
Right, and I think that question is going to be very hard to answer with John Rice Plumlee being in some starting lineups for the Ole Miss baseball team. Also, you have Jerrion Ely still playing baseball. There's no signs of either of them kind of quitting baseball for football just yet. So I think that this will be a very rough draft of the football team in the spring game. And, hey, it might even give Lane Kiffin the idea of, John Rice Plumlee's good. I've seen tape of this guy, but I've seen Matt Corral throw the ball in person. I've seen him make plays that I didn't expect him to make. And Matt Corral is an athlete. People forget just because he got hurt and then John Rice Plumlee stepped in, people forget how athletic he really is and his passing ability. But there's also recruits that Ole Miss has landed at quarterback that could also maybe try to work their way into the starting lineup, like a 3-star quarterback, Cade Renfro from Texas. He has shown that he has a cannon, and he is more of the pocket passer than the past Ole Miss quarterbacks like Jordan Tiamu, Chad Kelly, Matt Corral, players like that.
Swag Kelly, man.
Swag. Yeah, he was actually he was at Clemson
yes,
for a little bit. Yeah.
Yes, he was.
But I think that this is going to be a test for Matt Corral especially, and I would love to see just the kind of play style that Lane Kiffin has in this spring game, and the kind of the new mentality that he brings to the team, because Lane Kiffin is coming from FAU, where he has won conference titles, and he has a winner's mentality, and he knows how to win with Alabama. And Jay, if I'm not mistaken, I believe we may or may not have a caller at the moment.
That is correct. We do have a caller. I think it's Ben, and he's on with us. Can you hear us, Ben?
Hey, yeah, it's Ben.
Hey, what's going on, Ben?
Hey, guys, I was just wondering, what were y'all's thoughts on the Tyson Fury match?
Oh, okay. We're going back to Tyson Fury.
Wrapping it back around.
I like it. Yeah, we'll tie it back. We actually talked a lot about this at the start of the show, but we'll go back over a few things. First off, for me, I think you can't really, because we had a caller earlier in the show, and they felt like that Wilder's corner should not have thrown in the towel during that 7th round, and I actually disagree with that, because I just feel like when we were watching that fight, Wilder's ability to defend himself really, there was a difference in that 6th and 7th round. He had lost that spring in his step that he had in the first 2 rounds. We had talked about that punch specifically that Fury landed on Wilder's ear, and how he was kind of off kilter after that. But if you look at the numbers, Fury outlanded Wilder 267 to 141. Or outthrew him 267 to 141, and then outlanded him 82 to 34. So it was a complete mismatch, really, the whole fight, and it was a consistent beatdown. So, I don't know. Jason, you feel like that there's a potential for a rematch?
I definitely do. And Ben, I'm not sure if you heard about this, but before the fight, Tyson Fury had an interview where he said if he loses this fight, he's done. Even though he would have 3 more fights left on his ESPN contract, he would do anything that he could to opt out of it. He'd retire. But after winning this fight, and now that he is the heavyweight champion of the world, I think that Tyson Fury is loving the money that he got from the fight, first of all.
Exposure.
Exposure. Publicity. And I think that Deontay Wilder is not going to go down with his first loss. He's going to try to regain that image that he had of being the perfect boxer, the best boxer in the world. So I think that there's definitely a rematch in sight, a Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, number 3. But Ben, can I get your insight on who you thought was going to win the fight beforehand, and what your reactions were during the fight?
Yeah, for sure. Going into it, I thought Wilder was a for sure win. He was like 42-0 with 41 knockouts. The stats were there.
Right.
I didn't think it was going to be as much of a beatdown as it was. And, I'm curious to see because I heard that Fury had, when you hit him in the ear and kind of knocked him off equilibrium, that he had busted his eardrum. So everything was kind of off for Wilder. So, I'm curious to see how it would have turned out if that had not happened.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to the stat that we talked about just a few minutes ago. Yes, that punch had a significant impact on the outcome of the fight, but you've got to look at the whole 7 rounds, right? You've got to look at the fact that there were 287 punches thrown by Fury. There were only 141 by Wilder. 82 of those landed for Fury. Only 34 landed for Wilder. Again, there was, just a consistency from Fury. He landed 58 power punches in less than 7 rounds, and he only had 38 in the first meeting with Wilder. So again, I think that one punch is what a lot of people will point to, and they'll say, oh, well, if he hadn't gotten clocked in the ear, it could have been completely different. I think the numbers say otherwise. I think you look at the numbers, and you look at the fact that really throughout the entire fight, Fury, he was kind of toying with Wilder there for the first few rounds. It was a little bit more even. Wilder had more energy, and it just over time it called up to him. 6-7 rounds of being beat, with, how much does Fury weigh in at? Do you know right off the top of your head, Jason?
I think he was like I want to say
260 something.
Yeah, he's like 260.
He's a big dude. So I think that the consistency of Fury would not have changed the outcome of the fight. Again, a lot of people point to that one punch. They can say the ruptured eardrum made the difference.
He's 254. Just throwing that out
254.
there.
It's 254 of muscle. It's funny, though. I did see something on Twitter this morning from Wilder, and he said, I'm not sure what to make of this. So I get your thoughts on this, Ben, before we let you go. But he said that the 40-pound costume that he wore coming into the fight made him fatigued. What do you make of that?
I mean, I think that's a little BS because, 40 pounds, that's a lot for a costume. But when you're talking about a guy who's like 6'7", 230, and the dude's got a weight lift, he's strong. It's not like he's weak. 40 pounds probably isn't much to him,
Yeah.
So I don't think he is as fatigued as he may say.
Yeah. I agree. But we really appreciate you taking the time to call in, man. Thanks for hearing from you.
Always. Great talking to y'all.
Thanks
Yes,
so
sir.
much, Ben. Well, Jay, I think this has definitely tripled our previous call-in record of 1, and now we have gotten in 3 just today.
Yeah.
So, man, I'm glad that y'all are liking the show, and we're loving talking any Ole Miss sports and sports abroad.
Absolutely. Again, just definitely reach out to us on Twitter or Instagram, Facebook at After Review Show. If you want to connect with us there, we usually post the show as a podcast on iTunes and Spotify. You can check it out there at After Further Review. But yeah, always enjoy talking Ole Miss sports with you, Jason. Another great episode. Glad we got to talk to Miss Marianne at the top of the show and all the callers who called in. So appreciate everyone listening. Yeah, we'll do it again next week. So for Jason Price, I'm Jay Smith, and this has been After Further Review.